POV block, it's a POV switch. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Listen to Pavarotti.
Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And, I guess it's time for me to make a few comments about some things, especially one that I keep getting over and over, and I know why that one is being misread and misconstrued, because it's so hard to figure out all of the strange stuff that went on in the investigation in this case, but I'm going to give you some clarity on it. One thing I want to comment on is I was watching The Great Lana last night and listening to the interview with Showalter, and it's exactly what we expected, in my humble opinion. Showalter's last contact with anybody. Anyway, I'm not going to go into all that. I just found that to be very interesting. You might want to go watch it. The really interesting interview, though, is going to be the one that she said she's got here in a couple of weeks. And that is the extended interview that they did with him on December the 1st and the 2nd, because that's when they were further into the investigation between him and Chestnut. And that's where I think there is some things that can be gleaned, because it's cryptically written in the police reports, if you followed my previous videos on this, and it almost insinuates that there was somebody else staying with Showalter that weekend. And that's what I'm really interested to hearing, and see if there's clarity on that. Because while there's no way that Showalter and Chestnut actually committed the crime, there is a small chance that they had contact with people that did, in my humble opinion. And I'll be interested to see if that pans out or not. But when I look at things like those Sigma Chi interviews, I mean, people listen to those and, oh my gosh, listen to this. They're the Delts. It's the Delts. They're dealing Adderall. I'm like, give me a break. Give me a break. Adderall is a prescription med, okay? They don't go down in Mexico and manufacture it in bulk. It's a prescription med. The kids that get prescriptions, they sell it to other people. This isn't a drug syndicate that's going to cause people to go unalive people for telling on them for selling their Adderall, because it's a rule of supply and demand in the drug world. You can't get enough Adderall to create a drug empire. It's not an infinite amount to be able to distribute. You can only get as much as you get prescriptions for. So to you go down that road is ridiculous. But the other things people get from it are, I listen to it and I go, man, this is nobody was mad at Ethan. Ethan was great. People loved Ethan. He liked to play video games and maybe do a little bit of Adderall here and there as he played his video games. One thing I never heard from all of the interviews that has been released, I've never heard anything about a frat fight that night. See, we've heard of this frat fight now for 3 years from the 4chan posts, yet there's not a person in the entire town that even insinuates a argument or a frat fight or the Davids, pumped up on steroids. So when I listen to those interviews, I go, my goodness. I mean, the clickbaiters have been clickbaiting now for so many years on the frat boys in the Sigma Chi house, and there's no evidence for it, but they'll continue to clickbait. But then we get to things like, what, Jack Decor then? Let's go over to Decor. All right, it's Decor. Disregarding all the evidence against that. And then they jump back over to, it's Showalter and Chestnut now. And since I've already done so much work on the Showalter and Chestnut angle, I'm going to go ahead and address that in this one and correct some incorrect thinking out there. But I'm not harping on anybody. I just know that this incorrect thinking is something that's easily confused. And let me just unconfuse everybody, because I keep getting these comments over and over and over. Let me give you a couple of examples. Like, for instance, the girl that did the video said something about sample 1 matches the Sheath, and 1 came from Jack Showalter. If his blood is on the Sheath, then he's involved. According to court documents, It's Jack Showalter's DNA on the knife sheath, not Brian's. So, I mean, I've had probably 20 or 30 of these. I don't know who the girl is, and I don't know who's looked at these reports and confused folks. But let me just help you with this. But also, let me help you through some critical thinking exercises first. So, because I've had so many comments on this particular subject, I mean, I mean, a lot of people see this stuff and they really buy into it. Here's what you should probably do, though. Whenever you hear something that is so fantastical as we found documents that show that Jack Showalter is actually the DNA on the knife sheath, not Brian Kohberger's, you should stop and think, well, wait a minute. That would mean that not only did they know Jack Showalter was the perpetrator, they knew Brian Kohberger wasn't, so they set Brian Kohberger up for the crime so that they would not have to imprison Jack Showalter. Now, that would be the ISP, the FBI, the MPD, and all other agencies involved in the case. We're okay with Showalter walking around after stabbing 4 youngsters to death with a knife, but this criminology student who didn't do it, we're going to put him away to save him. And that should make you pause and go, because if there was actual evidence of this, and it's in documents that's been released for all of us to see and look and go, wow, look what they did. Well, that would make them tardos. All right. And maybe you should stop and think, wait a minute, they wouldn't do that because they're not tardos, or maybe they are. I don't know. Let me investigate further rather than just taking it at face value and running with it. That's just a critical thinking exercise you may want to go through before, you jump to conclusions based on some clickbait. So let me go ahead and show you the truth of the matter, because that is not true. It always confuses me because I know a lot of the people that watch my channel should have already kind of known this because I've gone over it so many times. But back in the day, months and months and months ago, if you recall, I logged all of the lab items in the case. Went through and painstakingly identified every single one of them and what the results were from them. From lab item, they start with Q, is lab item Q1 all the way through 135.2, or L35.2, 139. But number 1, lab item 1, was the knife sheath. 1.1 through 1.4 was DNA swabs of the sheath. 1.2 and 1.3, they couldn't get enough of the DNA to be able to do anything with it, so I didn't put it in here. And then lab item number 2 is DNA extracts, and then so forth and so on. But then I discovered way back then, I said, now look, what's weird is there is a separate list of lab items, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Separate from this other list. And these consist of the DNA swabs of Showalter, Berenberg, the extracts from Showalter and Berenberg, the prints from Showalter, the prints from Chestnut, and the DNA from Chestnut. And so that's weird that they're separate, the same numbers on separate things. So I can understand why somebody who hasn't really gone through and dug this thing apart would go, hey, lab item number 1 is the DNA swab of Showalter, which is the same as the knife sheath. Look, it's Showalter's DNA on the knife sheath. But that's why they should stop and do some critical thinking and think of the ramifications of what they're saying and investigate further. That's kind of what I try to do in most cases for myself. And here's why. For whatever reason, these 3, Showalter, Chestnut, and Berenberg, were part of a completely different investigation than everything else in this case. And I don't know if it's just because they all were in Boise at the time and the ISP used separate documentation for it, or if they had another reason, I don't know. But I do know that that absolutely happened, and here's the proof. When you look at, for example, the forensic report for the knife sheath, where they talk about item number 1 K-bar leather knife sheath, and how it's processed for latent prints and everything on this. But when you go up here, you'll see that the case agency for evidence description item number 1 is the Moscow Police Department. The agency case number is 22M09903. And then the laboratory case number is M2022 4843. And this is on all the evidence collected from the crime scene and everything else in the case. But then for some reason, we go over here and we see case agency is not Moscow Police Department. It's the ISP Investigations D2. The agency case number is not M09903. It's 22000030. So different agency, different case number. And along with that, you have different laboratory case numbers. Where this is 4843, this investigation used case number 4870. And then below it in this report, you can see it referenced the 4843 case to let you know that it's the same case, but different laboratory number, different case number, and different agency case number, and different agency. And you can see evidence description. Item number 1 was the reference oral swabs from Showalter. I have these unredacted, but it's easier for me to just pull these up that I did originally. And then item number 2 is a reference oral swab from Barenberg. Item number 3 is the extracts from 1 and 2. So when they say item number 1 is a swab from Showalter, it's obviously different than a K-bar leather knife sheath because you've got a different laboratory number and a different agency case number. So it's not Showalter's DNA on the knife sheath. It's a different logged investigation into these folks than the rest of the case. And let me clarify further. When you go to, for instance, the evidence submission receipts, I always found this to be interesting because you got the laboratory case number again for the K-bar knife sheath over here is 4870. Oh, excuse me, this isn't the K-bar knife sheath. This is the Moscow Police Department, 4843. And see down here, you got the K-bar knife sheath with USMC logo, laboratory item number 1. But then over here, and it's, by the way, it's a murder investigation. But then over here, you've got case number 4870 from the ISP and ISP Investigations D2 versus the MPD, even though, look, date of offense is the same. Agency case number is different, though. And this is Latah County is the county of offense, just like this. But this says charge death investigation, non-homicide. I always found that to be strange, but it talks about the biological screen of Jack Showalter and Cole Barenberg. So while it's lab item number 1, it's different case numbers. It doesn't mean Showalter was the DNA on the sheath. Again, I'm not faulting anybody for not understanding what I just went through, because when they first released these reports and they were all redacted, there was 2,700 of them, and I started going through them and they had them all in different order, and I started logging the evidence. I went, why is there 2 different lists of lab numbers that have the same number? And it took me a while. I mean, it took me quite a while to be able to figure it out. And then when they finally released the unredacted version of everything, where I could verify that the names that I thought were correct, then I looked at the case numbers and the death investigation and seen it was totally different. And then I figured out how there was different lab item numbers. But that's something, again, that's just an exercise that, you know, people probably should go through before they start putting out their little claims, because here's the thing. When it comes to these frat boys and Jack D and Jack Showalter, there's a whole group of people out there that will take any little innuendo towards their potential guilt, and man, they will run with it and they will be convinced, and it won't take much to convince them. So, I mean, I'm not telling anybody how to do anything, but, you know, just, I would think before you start insinuating that people with no criminal history and no evidence towards their guilt in the case, before you insinuate that their DNA was found on the freaking knife sheath, you might want to think it through and do a little bit more investigating. That's just all I'm saying. But anyway, I wanted to get that one out. I got another one I'll bring to you here shortly with some real information. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Post your comments, thoughts, criticisms. Till next time, Pibes out.
Be your superhero.